I want you to take a second and just imagine the invisible systems that you interact with every single day.
Right, the things we pretty much take for granted.
Exactly. I mean, we're talking about the electrical grid powering your lights, the financial protocols processing your morning coffee purchase,
Mhm.
the medical guidelines that dictate your care if you end up in an ER.
And even the democratic machinery that, processes your actual vote.
Yeah. And most of the
Mm.
time, we don't think about these massive gears turning behind the scenes and how they, well, until they grind to a halt or just break down completely.
Yeah.
So today's mission for this deep dive is to examine how these sprawling, invisible systems in India are currently undergoing some really radical, ground-up shifts.
And we have a truly fascinating stack of sources to work through today. For anyone who really wants to understand the current affairs landscape right now, this is essential. We're looking at a series of in-depth reports from the Indian Express, all dated May 3, 2026.
And when you lay all these reports side by side, what emerges?
It's a portrait of a country right in the middle of a foundational structural upgrade. But more importantly, it really highlights the intense friction that happens when everyday individuals collide with these massive bureaucratic machines.
Right, because understanding those macro shifts and the micro-human victories happening inside them is kind of the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed. It helps you look past the noise of the daily news cycle and actually see the machinery at work.
Exactly.
So, to understand this, let's look at the physical upgrades happening right now that directly impact human movement and safety. There's a brand new Vande Bharat train connection that just opened between Srinagar and Jammu.
And this is huge. I mean, for decades, navigating that roughly 260-kilometer stretch of terrain has been enduring a journey that's just plagued by unpredictable weather, subtle highway closures, and highly dangerous landslides.
Oh yeah, just a nightmare.
It was basically the kind of logistical black hole where an individual or a business never really knew how long transit would take.
The reports actually mentioned travelers arriving completely exhausted, covered in dust, dealing with severe back pain just from the state of the roads. But this new semi-high-speed rail link totally bypasses the geological nightmares.
Right.
It cuts that entire grueling journey down to just 4 hours and 50 minutes.
Wow. Under 5 hours.
Yeah. And the human impact of removing that friction is incredible. The reporting features this really touching anecdote about a soldier named Gagan.
Oh, right. The one expecting a child.
Exactly. So he's been posted in Kashmir for 2 years, and his wife is back home, expecting their first child literally the very next day. And standing on the platform, he told reporters that because of this direct train, he was finally going to be able to reach home that night.
That phrase they used in the reporting, the luxury of certainty, is really profound.
The luxury of certainty, yeah.
Because when you build infrastructure that turns a multi-day gamble into a guaranteed 5-hour commute, you aren't just moving people faster, you are fundamentally altering the economic and social integration of a whole region.
That's a great way to put it. And that same drive to replace uncertainty with, like, absolute reliability is happening in a totally different sector right now, too, which is disaster management.
Yes, the Department of Telecommunications. They just successfully tested a new Indigenous cell broadcast system.
Which, at first glance, you might look at that and think, well, don't we already get text messages when there's a severe weather warning?
Right, the sachet system.
Yeah. But the underlying technology here is entirely different. The old system relied on standard SMS.
Which is structurally flawed for emergencies. I mean, SMS is a one-to-one communication channel.
Right.
Think of it like sending a letter through the postal service. The network has to read the individual address of millions of phones and route a separate message to each one.
And during a panic, that just fails.
Totally. During a major panic, like an earthquake or a gas leak, millions of people are simultaneously trying to call their families. So the cellular network gets clogged, the system queues the messages, and your vital warning might arrive like 2 hours late.
Or you might just sleep right through a standard text message chime.
Exactly. But the cell broadcast system completely bypasses that bottleneck. Instead of a postal service, think of it like a radio tower.
Yeah.
It blasts a single overriding signal, and any mobile device within the geographic radius of that tower catches it instantly. It doesn't matter if the network is totally congested.
And you receive a real-time pop-up notification, right? Accompanied by a really sharp, blaring alarm that you physically cannot ignore.
Yes. It is the exact same underlying mechanism utilized in highly earthquake-prone nations like Japan. We're seeing a distinct pattern here. Upgrading these systems isn't about making them bigger. It's about removing the central bottleneck and pushing the solution directly to the point of need.
pushing the solution to the edge.
Yeah.
And we are seeing that exact philosophy applied to medical technology right now.
Ah, the AIIMS New Delhi report.
Yeah, AIIMS New Delhi has just introduced India's first portable, ultra-low-field bedside MRI machine.
And this represents a massive leap in neurodiagnostics because it changes the physics of how a hospital operates.
How so?
Well, traditionally, a standard MRI is a massive, highly sensitive electromagnet. It has to be permanently housed in a dedicated copper-shielded room to prevent outside interference, and it requires vast amounts of liquid helium to keep it cool.
Which creates a terrifying logistical problem if you have a critically ill, highly unstable patient in the ICU.
Exactly.
If someone suffers a stroke or traumatic brain injury, they are likely hooked up to ventilators, multiple IV drips, arterial lines. To scan their brain, medical staff have to physically disconnect them, load them onto a transport bed, navigate hospital corridors and elevators, and then place them into the MRI suite.
And that physical movement alone can trigger a fatal drop in blood pressure.
Right. But the ultra-low field MRI operates on just a fraction of the magnetic strength. It plugs into a standard wall outlet.
It's amazing.
You literally wheel it directly to the patient's bedside in the ICU, slide it over their head, and get the critical imaging without ever disconnecting their life support.
So it's like we're moving from dial-up to broadband in the physical world.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. Instead of a dangerous multi-day road trip, it's a sleek train ride. Instead of the text message you missed during a tsunami, it's a broadcast alarm that overrides your phone. And instead of dragging a dying patient to an MRI room, the MRI rolls up to the bed.
It's a total paradigm shift toward what we could call decentralized resilience.
Decentralized resilience, I like that.
No.
Modernizing a society requires building safety and efficiency directly into the edges of the system, rather than relying on a centralized hub that can just, fail.
But here is the big pivot for this deep dive. This idea of pushing the solution to the edge is fantastic for medical emergencies or train routes, but what happens when this central system itself is the problem?
Right.
You can build all the fast trains and bedside MRIs in the world, but if the foundational security and democratic systems are compromised, the gadgets don't matter at all.
No, they don't.
And we are seeing massive developments in how systems handle high-stakes threats and electoral integrity.
Starting with security developments that stretch far beyond domestic borders. In a highly significant geopolitical shift, Canada's intelligence service, CSIS, has officially utilized the term Canada-based Khalistani extremist.
Abbreviated as CBKE, right?
Yes, CBKE, for the first time in a public threat assessment report.
And the specific language they chose there is crucial. They explicitly referenced the 1985 Air India Flight 182 bombing, which killed 329 people, as a CBKE-related attack.
And you have to understand, words in an international intelligence report are a form of geopolitical currency.
What do you mean?
Well, changing a designation from a general threat to a specifically named extremist faction alters the legal, investigative, and diplomatic protocols between two nations. Acknowledging that specific historical context in an official capacity is a major shift in institutional memory.
So bringing that back to domestic security, specifically the security of the ballot box, the machinery of democracy just faced a very raw stress test in West Bengal.
It certainly did.
The Election Commission had to order a massive repoll in 285 booths in the faulted constituency.
And the official reasoning cited severe electoral offenses and subversion of the democratic process. When investigators actually examined the electronic voting machines, they found tampering.
But this wasn't like some sophisticated cyber hack, right?
No, not at all. Individuals had literally placed black tape over the specific party symbols and buttons on the EVMs.
I mean, just imagine walking into a voting booth to participate in the highest civic duty of a democracy and finding your preferred candidate physically blocked off by a piece of electrical tape. How do you maintain trust in a system when the violations are that blatant and physical?
And that exact question of systemic trust was escalated all the way to the Supreme Court regarding a different constituency in Bengal. The conflict centered entirely on the personnel tasked with counting the votes.
Right, the counting staff.
Exactly. The ruling TMC party filed an urgent plea expressing deep apprehension about the Election Commission utilizing central government employees for the counting process.
And just to be clear for everyone listening, we are not taking a stance on the politics here at all. We're just reporting what the sources outline.
Absolutely. We're just looking at the institutional mechanics.
Right. So the Supreme Court declined to pass any further orders on the matter, which essentially upheld the Election Commission's process. The EC's solution was to deploy a randomized mix of both central and state government employees in the counting rooms.
And the reporting notes that both the ruling TMC and the opposition BJP publicly interpreted this outcome as a victory for their own side.
Which is pretty standard in politics.
Yeah. The TMC stated the ruling validated the need for a balanced staff mix, while the BJP stated the court's refusal to intervene validated the EC's original protocols.
So the political spin is expected. But the mechanism itself is what deserves our attention here, because we have a highly emotional, volatile problem. Deep-seated distrust between rival political factions over who physically tallies the ballots.
And the system's response isn't to just demand personal trust.
Yeah.
It is to engineer trust mechanically by legally mandating a randomized mixing of personnel from different levels of government. The structure itself forces transparency. Neither side can logically claim the room was stacked with loyalists.
Right, you engineer the system so that trust is a byproduct of the design. But sometimes these systems are so rigidly engineered that they end up crushing the very citizens they are supposed to serve.
That is a harsh reality, yeah.
We have this glaring, almost absurd contrast in the sources between how the macroeconomy treats massive corporations versus the bureaucratic nightmare an everyday citizen has to endure.
Oh, you're talking about the Macroeconomic Outlook report. The chief economic advisor, Vianantha Nageswaran, delivered a remarkably sharp critique of the Indian private sector that illustrates this perfectly.
Yes, the profit growth stats.
He pointed out that post-COVID, the top 500 companies listed on the BSE and NSE experienced explosive profit growth. I mean, averaging 30.8% annually.
Which is wild, because you hear 30.8% profit growth and you naturally assume the economy's on fire.
Right.
You assume they must be building factories, laying down into supply chains, hiring thousands of workers, pouring money into research.
But that is the core of the CES critique. Despite those soaring profits, capital formation rates have remained highly disappointing.
And by capital formation, you mean?
Real capital formation means putting steel in the ground, investing in tangible assets within India. Instead, a significant portion of the corporate sector is hoarding cash reserves or setting up family wealth offices in places like Dubai or Singapore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The CEA essentially called out the hypocrisy. The private sector frequently complains about government regulations and red tape, yet when handed massive profits, they show a deep reluctance to invest in domestic nation building.
So massive corporations use their leverage to legally hold back vast wealth while critiquing the system. Now, take that corporate reality and place it next to the micro-reality of a puny infrastructure contractor named Girish Malani.
This story is just incredible.
It is. His story is a staggering 10-year war against unyielding bureaucracy. Back in 2016, during the sudden demonetization wave, Malani was carrying 2 lakh rupees in old 500 rupee notes.
And he was actively on his way to deposit the cash before the government's strict deadline, right?
Yes. But his vehicle was intercepted by a routine police patrol because local municipal elections were underway. The police, adhering to strict protocols regarding the movement of undocumented cash during an election cycle, seized the money.
So Malani then had to navigate a labyrinth of inquiries with the income tax department.
Right.
He produced all his ledgers. He proved the money was entirely legitimate revenue from his contracting business. He was cleared of all wrongdoing.
The authorities agreed the money was his and arranged to send it back. But the physical cash was finally handed back to him on December 31st, 2016.
Which, painfully, happened to be exactly one day after the government's absolute non-negotiable deadline to exchange demonetized currency at the bank.
He missed the deadline by 24 hours because the government's own police and tax departments were physically holding his money.
Exactly.
So he goes to the Reserve Bank of India with his legitimate, cleared cash, and the RBI refuses to accept it. They told him the deadline had passed.
Yeah.
And they added a technicality. The police officers who seized the cash failed to write down the individual serial numbers of all 400 notes, which was a procedural requirement for confiscated currency.
Now wait, looking at this RBI defense, it's actually hard to completely dismiss their logic from a systemic view.
Really? How so?
If the central bank lets Malani deposit his cash a day late, what stops a million other people from showing up on January 2nd, claiming they also had a really good excuse? Doesn't a financial system serving 1 billion people require absolute unbending deadlines just to function at all?
Yeah, that is the classic textbook defense of systemic rigidity. The institution argues that if you bend a structural rule for one person, the entire structural integrity collapses.
Right.
The RBI argued they were legally bound by the letter of the law, but Malani refused to accept that. He spent a decade fighting the central bank in court.
10.
Yes. And to bypass their technicality, He personally sat down and manually documented the serial numbers of all 400 demonetized notes to submit as evidence. And finally, the Bombay High Court ruled in his favor.
So what was the legal logic of the court overturning the central bank's rule there?
The High Court established a vital precedent regarding the spirit versus the letter of the law. They ruled that strict administrative deadlines cannot be blindly weaponized against a citizen when the government's own machinery caused the delay.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. A citizen should not be financially punished because the state's police department and tax department experienced an administrative bottleneck. The system has to bear the cost of its own friction.
That's a powerful precedent.
It really is. And the most incredible part of this story is Milani's reaction. After a 10-year legal war to get his 2 lakh rupees back, his very first act was going to a local temple and donating 5,000 rupees worth of food.
Wow.
It is a striking human victory over a cold, unfeeling ledger.
It truly is. But it also reveals a critical tension. The state isn't just defending old rules right now. It is in the active process of rewriting the deepest rules of our society.
What do you mean by deepest rules?
Well, if you look at the reports, we are witnessing foundational shifts in the laws that govern our energy grid and even the laws that medically define human life.
Okay, let's look at the energy grid first. According to the sources, a high-powered U.S. nuclear executive mission is heading to India in mid-May.
Right, and this diplomatic and corporate push is a direct consequence of a landmark piece of legislation passed recently called the Shakti Act of 2025.
Sustainable harnessing and advancement of nuclear energy for transforming India.
Exactly. And to understand how massive this is, you have to realize that for decades, India's nuclear power sector has been a fortress. It was a strict, highly guarded state monopoly.
Right.
The Shakti Act demolished that wall. It officially allows private players and potentially foreign entities to enter into nuclear operations and fuel management.
Because the core logic from the government is that India desperately needs baseload energy to transition away from coal, right? And renewables like solar and wind are just too intermittent.
Yes. They want to bring in small modular reactors, or SMRs.
And how do those differ from what we have now?
Traditional light water reactors are bespoke, massive construction projects that take a decade to build and frequently run billions over budget. SMRs are essentially the Lego blocks of nuclear power.
Well, you just snap them together.
Basically, they can be factory-built-in components, shipped on standard trucks, and assembled on site. But an official in the report noted that this outreach to the U.S. is driven less by the need for this specific technology and more by an urgent need for massive capital investment.
Okay. And to attract that private capital, the government had to alter the liability regime, didn't they? They essentially lowered the financial liability for equipment suppliers.
Yes, and this was the major sticking point for decades. Foreign nuclear companies refused to invest because the old laws dictated that if a localized accident or meltdown occurred, the global supplier could be held financially liable.
Oh, I see.
They demanded that the sovereign state shoulder the ultimate risk. By changing those liability rules to favor the suppliers, the state is effectively handing over the keys to the nuclear reactor to private, profit-driven entities just to keep the lights on.
That is a staggering transfer of risk and really a complete rewriting of the rules of sovereignty.
It is.
But an even more intimate rule is currently being challenged in the medical sphere. We have another individual fighting a decade-long battle, this time a 78-year-old doctor from Kerala named S. Ganapathy.
Ah, the Supreme Court directive on brain death protocols.
Yes. Dr. Ganapathy has spent 10 years fighting against the established medical protocols used to legally and medically declare a patient brain dead.
Yeah.
Specifically targeting a procedure known as the apnea test.
And his allegations are incredibly severe, aren't they?
Very. He claims there's a profound lack of transparency in corporate hospitals and suggests malpractices are occurring regarding the harvesting of organs from patients declared brain dead.
The crux of his argument focuses on the mechanism of the test itself. So, to perform an apnea test, doctors temporarily disconnect a comatose patient from a ventilator to observe if their brainstem triggers an independent attempt to breathe.
Right.
They monitor physical chest movements and carbon dioxide levels in the blood. But Dr. Ganapathy argues this is a highly subjective test that requires human interpretation, leaving absolutely no objective paper trail.
Because he noticed a highly suspicious spike in brain death declarations in his state. And he argued that unscrupulous doctors could easily manipulate the apnea test parameters.
So what is he demanding instead?
He is demanding that the system mandate advanced, undeniable diagnostic tests before legally declaring someone dead. Specifically, he wants the use of electroencephalograms, or EEGs, or cerebral angiograms.
Which makes sense clinically. An EEG maps the actual electrical waves of the brain, providing a digital readout. And a cerebral angiogram maps the physical blood flow into the brain tissue.
Right.
These tests create an objective, recorded piece of data that proves the cessation of brain activity. It cannot be easily falsified.
And the Supreme Court just listened to him. They stated his concerns carry a ring of truth.
Wow.
Yeah. And they have ordered AIIMS to establish a high-level, 3-expert panel of neurology specialists to formally review the brain death protocols. They had to decide if these advanced recorded tests should become the new legal standard across the country.
So when you look at all these cases side by side, a very clear picture emerges. We are watching the privatization of our most dangerous energy sources, and the Supreme Court stepping in to redefine the exact medical moment a human life legally ends.
And while those seem like entirely different universes, they are bound by a single, highly fragile thread, which is public trust. Whether it is a society trusting private corporations with nuclear material under lowered liability rules, or a grieving family trusting a hospital to honestly define the end of their loved one's life.
Massive systems, whether they govern energy, healthcare, or elections, just cannot function without undeniable transparency.
Exactly. If the public ever suspects that the rules are designed to protect the system rather than the citizen, the social contract fractures.
So true.
The overarching takeaway from this stack of reports is that while these sprawling systems are evolving rapidly, sometimes toward incredible efficiency like the Vande Bharat trains, and sometimes toward controversial privatization, it is individual persistence that acts as the ultimate catalyst for fairness.
Yeah.
It took a Dr. Ganapathy to challenge an entire medical establishment, and a Girish Malani to manually write down 400 serial numbers to force a central bank to admit its own administrative flaws.
And that leaves us with a critical question to ponder as we look toward the future. As we automate our disaster warnings with cell broadcasts, as we rely on private capital to build our nuclear grid, and as we wait for expert panels to define our most intimate medical boundaries, where is the line between systemic efficiency and human empathy? When you analyze the complex machineries you interact with every single day, your bank's algorithms, your hospital's protocols, your local electoral booth, are they truly built to serve you, or are they merely operating to serve their own rules?
Think about that the next time you hit a bureaucratic wall, or, the next time you see those invisible gears turning behind the daily headlines. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.